Santiago de Chile, October 2nd, 2012, and have the pleasure and the honor of meeting here Mr. Timoti Golvi, well known as the father of the modern coaching. So welcome, Tim, to Santiago de Chile.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here, really.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I would like to ask you about the relationship you have made during the inner game developing about what is tennis and business.
Tennis and business are two outer games. Tennis, you hit a ball over a net and to beat the opponent. In business, you're beating another opponent in a different environment and with different rules and different variables. So they're very different. But the similarity is that they're games, that they're not real. They're played for a purpose that is more real, that people often forget. The inner game is the same almost no matter what outer game you're playing. Take tennis, for example. A person who thinks, I have a bad backhand. When the ball comes towards the backhand, the person doesn't see a ball, he sees a threat coming through the air. And so he responds as he would to a threat, defensively and tightly. And then he stabs out. His behavior is affected by actual change in physiology to that perception of something coming towards his weakness. And then, of course, he hits a bad shot and opponent wins the point, and so the results are poor, and then he goes and says, I do have a terrible backhand, and the circle is complete. And the next time a ball comes, he feels even more stressed. It's not different in business. Telephone rings, it's the boss. And coming right towards my weakness, he's going to talk about what I did wrong or what I didn't succeed in. And I tighten up and I get stressed and I try very hard to make a good impression, which has the opposite effect. And I come out of the conversation again thinking I'm not very good at what I do. So self-image is linked with perception, is linked with physiology, is linked with performance, is linked with results, is linked back to self-image. Coaching is a way of breaking that loop, that negative cycle. And it can be done at any one of those links, at the self-image, or at the ball, or at the backhand itself. An interesting thing is a person who has a quote bad backhand won't be able to replicate it without the ball. He won't be able to show you how he does it.
Right.
And if you can, by coaching skill, make him more aware of how he's actually swinging the racket will begin to change in a way that feels better and works better. That's the principle of natural learning. Well, it's the same in a business. I'm just thinking of a coaching with an executive who I was told was overly aggressive. And they wanted me to coach him so that he wouldn't be so aggressive. And it was a setup, because if I started coaching him on aggression, he would get more aggressive and it'd be directed at me. So I started having him watch the ball by saying, next week I want you just to watch the eyes of your direct reports. Just notice where they're looking when you're talking to them. And he came back after the week and he says, oh, it was very strange. For the first 2-3 days, they were looking down, they were looking all around. They weren't looking at me. After the 4th and 5th day, they started looking at me. And the communication was much stronger. And I said, that's very interesting. Did you change your manner of speaking at all? He says, no, I was just normally me. And so he was not aware. Obviously he changed. And I asked him then to notice next week when he was being strong, when he was being neutral, and when he was being evocative. And there are times and place for each one of those. And so he came back and reported on it, and it turned out that 50% was evocative, and 20% was strong, and 30% was neutral. And I said, is that how you usually do it? And he said, yeah, I was just being myself. And so he knew, and I knew, that he'd changed a lot.
Okay.
But neither one was going to admit it. I wasn't going to say it. So
Funny.
It's the fundamental lesson behind this is if you want to see something change, become more aware of it the way it is, and be clear about your goal and behavior. You can trust behavior to change in the direction of that goal. It's a very simple principle, but very seldom practiced. People think they're doing something wrong. They try hard to change their behavior. And like the aggressive person would start speaking very gently to keep from looking aggressive. So it has nothing to do with being appropriate to the occasion, just having a concept of how it should be. And corporate environment is full of shoulds and shouldn'ts, conscious ones, spoken ones, and unconscious, culturally silent ones that control a lot of the corporate behaviors and limit a lot of corporate performance. In both areas, learning is what's needed. The human capacity as a child to learn is incredible, and to access that capacity as an adult is what's going to make the difference in your tennis and what's going to make the difference in corporate success.
Very interesting what you said. The $100 million question. What makes people change from weakness to strength?
Desire.
Desire.
And the desire, not I don't want to be weak, but I want to develop this potential that right now isn't very developed. And if I start becoming aware of that particular quality, it will, and practice it, it'll become stronger. So practice in both tennis and corporate world are essential to improving, but the desire lies behind it. And people don't often feel their desire, they just think their desire. And so it's not as powerful as a child who actually wants something and naturally moves towards that. Children are very good salespeople, and yet what sales school did they go to? They sell their mother different than they sell their father. They learn it naturally by how the mother and father react when they're trying to get what they want. And they learn naturally. And that's art that could be relearned in modern times.
Mm-hmm. And what should be the difference for you, or the distinction between desire and motivation?
Well, it's just a linguistic distinction. I think they're both the same. In both cases, it depends on where the desire comes from, is how effective the motivation of the desire will be. It can come from ego. It can come from yourself wanting to express itself.
Okay.
And that makes a big difference in your performance and your enjoyment, as well as your learning.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For your time, for your lessons and teachings in Santiago. Thank you for
My
being
pleasure.
here.
Thank you.
Tim. Thank you.